Welcome again to Mercer University's Professional Development Series. My name is Myron Rando. I'm the Associate Director of Recruitment and Community Engagement, and we are appreciative of you joining us once again to engage with us and learn a little bit from our faculty here at Mercer University, our faculty and our partners. And today we have got another engaging and exciting webinar topic that is incredibly interesting. So David Canady is our entrepreneur in residence, if you would. He's a professor of entrepreneurship here at Mercer University, and he's going to talk to us about innovation elevated, excuse me. How do you innovate in the middle of a crisis? So David, tell us how you got to Mercer. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came upon this topic.
Well, I have been in the making community most all my life, certainly all my professional career. Was in the printing and publishing industries, graphic design for nearly 30 years. And a couple years ago, decided it was time for a change and really realized from everything I was doing with my business that while I enjoyed the printing aspect of things and the publishing aspect of things, it was helping businesses and helping people within business that really is what kind of gave me that charge, and that's really what my calling felt like. And so therefore I rented an office at the Innovation Center and continued doing business for a while, and then I ultimately just ended up being involved entrepreneurial voluntarily and working with the students, and then that's moved into helping with classes and that sort of thing. So it's something that I just really enjoy, and the entrepreneur aspect is an aspect that's just, I feel like it's probably an overused word, but it's probably an underutilized process.
Certainly, and you hit on something there. I don't know if folks know about this. What is the Mercer Innovation Center and what happens there?
Well, the Mercer Innovation Center is essentially an entrepreneurial and innovation incubator of sorts. It's where students can come, they can talk to staff here about ideas and whatnot, and they can get some consultation there. One of the big things that happens, there's a couple contests a year where the students can enter with their business ideas. They can do a business pitch and they can win money, they can win an office space, and then they, as a part of that through that money and through some of the resources, they're able to have interns and other people come in and help work with them. Stephanie Howard, who is the director of the Innovation Center, she always is, working with them. And as the entrepreneur in residence, when I'm here, if they've got a question or something, I'm helping them as well.
That is awesome. So David has spent a lot of time working with our students, helping coach them through creating ideas and marketing ideas and systematizing ideas. And you're going to give us a little bit of that today. So I'm excited to hear this. Now, folks that are watching us, we want your questions. As always, we welcome your questions. Down at the bottom, there's a question and answer feature. Go ahead and type your questions in there throughout the presentation. We'll get to them at the end. But if you have a question, don't wait. Type it in there right away. And as soon as we end the presentation, we'll have a moment that we can ask David some of these questions. So David, I'm going to give you the floor. Take it away, my friend.
All right, great. Thank you. We'll go to the first slide here, and it's just a quote from Winston Churchill: "Never let a good crisis go to waste." And that may sound a little not very compassionate in an essence, but really the essence of the quote is that whenever there's a problem, whenever there is an issue, there is an opportunity. And that's how every entrepreneur and innovator should think. Whenever they come across a problem, there is an opportunity to do something about it and make something good come about it. And whether it's just through great leaders or entrepreneurs or innovators, once you get to a crisis situation, more cream rises to the top, so to speak, of people actually engaging in this type of thing. People that are serial entrepreneurs are doing this stuff kind of every day, but for, people in the general public, they're not really thinking about this, but they get into a crisis mode and they really, here again, the cream rises to the top and the ideas start to flow.
And that necessity is the mother of innovation kind of idea.
Exactly. That's most definitely it. And in the good times, when people are busy and whatnot, they're not necessarily trying to innovate. They're trying to take advantage of what they're doing that is profitable and is working for them. And they're not always necessarily trying to start something new. So yes, most definitely. This is a big part that now that we are in a crisis situation, not only the pandemic, but then now a financial crisis and also a social crisis, this is just going to dramatically shape our future in years to come. So as devastating as it is, and as troublesome and worrisome as it is, I'm excited to see what people will do from a positive standpoint of taking these and truly making problems opportunities. Just to kind of, reference a few startups that came about during crises. We want to kind of, in this time, give some hope with different things. And one way that I can do that in an aspect is kind of show you a few companies. These are just a tidbit of a few companies that are out there that started during crisis times. One of the ones I found interesting was the public supermarkets. George Jenkins started at 17 as a grocery clerk. By 23 years old, he was starting public supermarkets. So he was on a fast track in 5 years of learning that business from a teenager to ending up developing a company out of it. And from that standpoint, that just shows age is not, an issue and is not a limitation and whatnot. So I thought he was a great example. The Gallo Winery, right in the middle of the Great Depression as well, and kind of towards the end of it, I guess. But the fact that what they did, and the thing I found interesting from being a professor, is that they were obviously listening to their marketplace. Now, that was kind of a sad thing during the Great Depression, because I'm sure there were a lot of people drinking more than they needed to. But Gallo came up with a wine that was cheaper in the marketplace, people could afford. And so that's one thing that I teach over and over again is listen to your marketplace, watch your marketplace and learn from it. And they pretty well did that with the Gallo Winery starting in the Great Depression. And then that down to Venmo. Venmo is just a classic case of, two college roommates getting together after college and coming up with an idea. Ultimately, it was going to involve music. And then they found a way they decided to do it through technology of paying friends back. And now, just like Google, Venmo is a verb as much as it is a company name. Mm-hmm. So these are things that really show, and these are huge businesses. These aren't just mom and pops. These are huge businesses that started during a crisis. So it's hope from the aspect that it can be done, even in these uncertain times. And actually, I hate that. I'm so tired of that word, uncertain times. I'm sorry. I know everybody's, everything is in pretty much, some state of chaos, but I know everybody's hearing that all the time. And moving to really talking about entrepreneurship and where we stand, one of the things that is important to me is everything has changed. The dynamics for life has changed dramatically because of everything that we're going through right now. And that really has primed people for coming up with new ideas and identifying problems. I don't know, Myron, maybe what are your thoughts? Do you have something that's happened Absolutely. With your life that has changed the way you're going to be doing things moving forward?
Absolutely. So, I work in the admissions office here at Mercer. And so we are used to welcoming students into our doors and building rapport and making relationships that way, where you can shake a hand with a student, that you can put your hand on their back and walk them around campus. We can't do that anymore, right? Because of the social distancing procedure. So we've had to figure out a way to create opportunities virtually for students to feel that same connection, to build that same rapport, to connect with us at Mercer in the same way without being in the same space. And so we've had to do things virtually and digitally. And my old boss used to tell me, you never can go home again. So once things have changed, things have changed.
Right.
And so we realized that this is something we're probably going to be doing for the future. So we may welcome students to campus again, but we will also have to do it virtually as well. So this is a new addendum, if you would, to our new normal. So,
well, and you think about it, if somebody had told you before all this happened, the end of last year, hey, we're going to not be doing campus tours, the way we were doing, we're going to be doing this stuff virtually, you would have said what my first slide says here, or the first case is new mindset of, because we've always done it that way. It can't be done. It's impossible. It can't be done.
Yeah, how do you build relationships without somebody coming on campus? How do they fall in love with the place,
Exactly. And fortunately, young people are more used to the technology than, say, we are. But the fact of the matter is, whatever it is, we're going to have to get used to it. And that's one of the things to kind of bring to note that, we've got a new mindset here. The whole philosophy of we've always done it that way doesn't work anymore. And that's not possible, doesn't work anymore. People are open to new ideas now because they've had to deal with it. Doctors with telemedicine, that sort of thing, being able to reach out, be with their doctor, communicate with them and that sort of thing, having to do it through the computer. It has its issues, but it also has its benefits. And particularly with some of the more at-risk people and that sort of thing, and the elderly, and they're able to do something like this, and they don't have to travel there. They can go, meet with the doctor at Emory, and while they're sitting at home, if they have to have some specialty, something that that case. So that's one of the biggest things with this is mindsets have changed. People's minds are now more open to doing things differently because they've had to. Exactly like you were saying, we were forced into this in many ways. If we had not been forced into this through this pandemic and the financial crisis and all, we would not necessarily be doing these things. So these entrepreneurial endeavors that have moved us to this case, and other businesses stepped up. I mean, just Zoom right here. I mean, think about how their business has changed because of this. It's not necessarily been in an entrepreneurial way, but they've sure had sales increases going along because of this. The other aspect is, yeah, most definitely. The other area of everything has changed is there's new problems. I mean, you think about it from the standpoint of healthcare. We have a new disease that we have to find a vaccine for. I mean, that's just a down and basic thing. That's a problem that did not exist. We may have to find new ways of doing business, not only virtually like this, but you think of in the retail market, we don't know how that's going to work out. And so more and more, it's going to be e-commerce and that sort of thing, so people are going to really have to figure out new ways to do commerce and also to be looking at supply chains. So, other aspect is we're going to have to paint, another problem is we're going to have to train people for new technologies. We don't even know what's going to exist in a couple of years because of this. And we're going to have to bring people up to speed on what's going on. So even that training potential is going to be entrepreneurial in some ways. And then one of the other aspects with the new problem is we're going to have to train for future crises. I mean, we've probably done that to some extent in the past, but I haven't really heard people talk about it as much as they are now. We're really going to have to be preparing ourselves better, not only financially, but also in some sort of training about how to handle this if these kind of things come around again. There's going to be new needs out there. Obviously healthcare is a huge issue right now. We've got certainly other things that are going to come into play, whether it's related to healthcare or how we're going to work from home, if we're going to work remotely. All these things are going to come up, and these are things that are the problems and needs are really where we're getting our ideas from. And that's where I think that people can really focus on what are the new problems that are coming into the marketplace, what are the new needs for customers that are coming into the marketplace, and how is that going to impact our globe, really, ultimately. And then the thing that is actually kind of exciting is there's new rules in some of these ways, just like they're working on fast tracking a vaccine, that's being done because, of legal changes. And there's going to be legal changes in other areas that are going to allow businesses to be more adaptable at certain things and to be able to fast track along innovations, whether it's medical or otherwise, to help us get through this. Businesses help through this economic crisis and through this time, and innovators help really the future and developing new things that will help us long term. So from that standpoint, these new rules and these new playing fields that we have are part of the change process. And I got the quote by Charles Darwin, talking about change, and the person who is the person or the business that is the most adaptable to change is going to be the one with the greatest amount of leverage to succeed. So if you're risk averse or change adverse, entrepreneurship and innovation may not be at the top of your list of things you want to do, but you never know when a great idea is going to strike. And really looking at two different ways that entrepreneurs and innovators and anybody in business or even in the social realms that people want to do something. One of the first ways that really you can handle something entrepreneurial is to pivot. You've already got an existing business running. You're not, trying to do something new right at this time, but the situation happens, you've got your chaos and your crisis. And so technology, embracing it is one of the first things people have to do. And that's what they've done during this crisis. We're doing it now instead of meeting, face to face and doing an interview and having a conversation. Leveraging your current assets and resources is a great way for people to take their equipment and their people or their space and do something different with it. You think about some of this personal protection equipment. You've got Gucci and Prada out there making, PPE equipment. I mean, think about the nurse that gets, something from Prada or Gucci, that's their PPE. And so, they'd have to be kind of excited about that from that standpoint. I think those companies are doing that more as a philanthropic thing instead of making money, but a lot of companies have shifted their resources and they're doing things like making masks and doing PPE that actually and hand sanitizer and whatnot that actually they are making money at. Also during this time, it's really important to engage with your customers. If we want to come up with new ideas, if your business is struggling in certain ways, because of what's going on and the traditional way that you've done things is not happening, now is the time to engage with your customers. You need to be talking to your customers. One, you want to make sure you hold on to them, but you also want to be talking to them because they are going to have the best ideas for you. As you have conversation with them, you engage with them, you ask them a question. Hey, Byron, what do you think about, the product and how it's working now? Could we do something different? Could we make it different? Those are the kind of conversations that we need to be having that will ultimately lead to innovation. Other pivots that you can do, you can do collaborative partnerships. From that standpoint, it's something that, we can, instead of having just, us by ourselves, you can do the things like, gift with purchase or bundling. And you may have somebody that's kind of in your realm, but not your competitor. And you can reach out and do something with them that you both can benefit from. And you can play off each other and that sort of thing. And it makes it hopefully more beneficial to everybody. And you're pushing each other's customers and that sort of thing back and forth. So collaborative partnerships, whether it's research, whether it's sales, whatever the case it may be, that's where those come into play. And a lot of people are doing, some of those sorts of things together. Brainstorming and experimenting, now is the time to do it. That's brainstorming new ideas is one of the things that I most enjoy, particularly with the students and anybody in particular. But you get to this stage where, here again, what's been working is not working. You've got to turn and pivot and look for some other things. And you're going to just have to intentionally do mind mapping or other kinds of brainstorming, maybe getting a focus group together bringing people together, and then experimenting with some of these things to see what might stick. Entrepreneurship.
Now I got to pause. Entrepreneurship. I've never heard that term. Is that a word, or is that a David Canady word? Tell me more.
It is not a David Canady word. I did find it recently. I've understood the concept for a long time, but I've only recently found the actual word. And it is really a philosophy. I put it at the bottom here. It's fostering an entrepreneurial, innovative mindset or spirit within your current infrastructure of your business. So if you have a company already and it's existing and you want to grow that company, you need to save money, whatever the case, come up with new revenue streams, new products, new ideas. Your own employees are some of the best people that can do that for you, even sometimes better than the owner of the company, because they're not down and engaged in the day-to-day things. And so people that are in your production department or in your sales department or in your accounting department, if you will work with them and teach them the processes about entrepreneurship, then they can help you do that from within. So they're really change agents from within, and they can save companies millions of ideas, millions of dollars, and they can actually help generate new revenue and make your production more efficient. So I really strongly encourage people to think about that. And even students going through, they may have an art degree or an engineering degree or whatever the case. I encourage them to take an entrepreneurship class because they learn that process. Most everybody think entrepreneurship's kind of, pulling from the hip. It's a kind of, maybe an art form more than a process. But it's not. There is a process that goes along with it. Certainly there is an art form as a part of it. But your success is really dependent upon you following a strong process. And so from that standpoint, I really encourage students to think about this entrepreneurial idea, because most likely they're not going to leave college day one and go to work for themselves. The majority, 99.5% of them, or 98% of them, are going to be working with somebody else. But man, if they go in there and they're doing more, and that company is open to doing more than just having an idea box, if they're really interested in change, if they'll foster this entrepreneurship, it can really change the face of their business.
That's good. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a real word. And then the last thing on this is, as you pivot, prepare that you're going to fail. And anything new you do, entrepreneurs talk about it all the time. You see it on the Instagram posts and whatnot, and the blogs, is that, an entrepreneur is not somebody who comes up with an idea and immediately, is making millions of dollars. There's somebody who has failed and failed again and failed again, but they've not given up. And that's the one thing with this, anything with entrepreneurship and innovation, particularly the aspect of when you're pivoting your business, keep trying at it. Do not give up. You want to continue your business, and that's an important part of this. We mentioned leveraging current assets, and we've got a Mercer alum who's just done that as part of the coronavirus. Pretoria Fields down South Georgia, they're actually a collective of a number of farms and that sort of thing. But one gentleman who's actually a physician started this because he just enjoyed craft beers and wanting to make craft beers. And they have a restaurant and that sort of thing. And but when the coronavirus came along, they had to shut down the restaurant. A lot of their resources were restricted with employees and different things and whatnot. And so ultimately they had to kind of slow down that side of their business. And as a process, they looked at whoever helped them with the formulary with the beers, helped them with a formulary with hand sanitizer. And this is a new for-profit part of their business. And who knows how long this might change.
I've got my bottle here, right here. So yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Right. Okay.
That's a pivot. That's definitely a strong pivot.
That is most definitely. And we've heard of other breweries doing something similar or the same sort of thing. And so from that standpoint, they're going to go back to making beer, and they're going to go back to their restaurant and all those other kind of things. But this aspect of how things have changed and the new needs is a perfect aspect for something like the hand sanitizer. And this may be long-term part of their business and a very potentially profitable part of their business.
Yeah, that's
Included
creative.
on here, their website, and actually the Mercer article that talks about it as a link that you can go to and find out a little bit more about it. But it's an amazing shift to being able to use their equipment from their brewery to do the hand sanitizer. This is the fun part to me, is the entrepreneurial ideation. Ideation is just really finding problems and finding solutions to them and creating solutions from those problems. One of the things that a lot of people do is, you know, they try to force the situation of trying to be entrepreneurial. I want to be an entrepreneur, so I'm going to find a problem. And that's great to go out digging after it and finding it. But a lot of people will force that situation without really considering the marketplace and considering the customer. So my biggest suggestion is to look at what you're passionate about and then look around, listen a lot, and live your life. And through those things, through your day-to-day life, whether you're teaching, whether you're, you know, advising, whether you're doing manufacturing, whatever the case, it may just be from the fact that you're going to the grocery store, or you're having to take care of a family member, or whatever that situation happens to be. Those are the best places to really find ideas. And those are the ones that really dig into the marketplace, because when you can find a solution to something like that, then people really hold on to it more in a way. They're attracted to it more because it resonates with them. If it doesn't resonate with them, and that's why I say focus on the customer's perspective. If it doesn't resonate with customers as a problem, even though you think it's one, then it's not going to go very far. Obviously, we can look at the marketplace, the workplace, and even social spaces for problems. It doesn't just have to be business issues. We've got a lot going on here, again, within our globe, within our nation in particularly, and the social spaces maybe is just as important of finding new things to do as, you know, the businesses. When I taught entrepreneurship for the journalism school, a couple of years ago, I allowed them to do nonprofits if they wanted to as a part of what they are doing from an entrepreneurial standpoint. A nonprofit or entrepreneurship and innovation does not have to be for-profit. I mean, you can look at Dr. Vo here on campus, who does the prosthetics, and you know, over in Vietnam, and that's a philanthropic thing for the university. But that was a great innovation that he came up with those pieces, and really helped a lot of people out of it. So entrepreneurship can be nonprofit related. It can be social related. I encourage people to look in those realms real strongly. Genesis Cooper, who is a student of mine, has an organization that she's doing called Pro Success, and it's really talking about, it's working with primarily the African American community and helping them build their resumes and work forward and coming up with a way to get scholarships and all. So there's a lot of people doing a lot of things in that area.
That's good. It can also be a nonprofit as well as a for-profit industry.
Most definitely. Most definitely. It's a change agent. It's something that you're doing that is a change agent is the big part. And then ultimately there's risk involved in it because you got to put your neck out on the line at some point in time. If it's mission oriented, that helps a lot. You want to make sure, believe it really matters. People think about that just on the social space, but in the workplace, in the marketplace, that's a huge thing as well. And believing it matters. And it doesn't have to be a vaccine, you know, it could be a new educational toy, you know, or whatever the case from that standpoint. But if you believe it really matters and it will help the community and solve a problem, or maybe create a solution where one just didn't exist, having it mission oriented, you're going to be more passionate about it. The people that work with you are going to be more committed, and ultimately you're going to have more loyal customers.
That makes sense. That definitely makes sense.
Consider your markets. It's better to have a small group of people when you start out that love your product and have a rapidly growing market than something that's kind of mediocre that people like, and maybe there's a big market out there, because you're really not going to get traction as easily potentially even if you've got a big market, if it's not something that people just love. So it's better to find something people love, they believe it matters, all those sorts of things, and then you can identify an evolving market where it's not going to be it's going to be hot for 1 or 2 years and then it's going to be over with. You want something you can see an evolving market out of. A couple last things. You hope your business is difficult to replicate. If it's not difficult to replicate, you're going to have a situation where you're going to have competition. So as you're thinking about these ideas, think about them in ways where you're going after this and it's difficult to replicate. And the last thing is, and this sounds a little strange, but it's okay to sound crazy to others. Most entrepreneurs, sounded crazy to their family and friends when they started ideas. But if it's something you believe in and you've planned for, and as I tell my students, if you prayed about, then go for it. And, that aspect, and that's where I tell them with some of their eyes, they're asking, well, is this a good idea? And I might give them some opinion about it, but if you've done those things, and particularly if you've prayed about it, then who am I to say it's not something to consider? So it really comes down, you have to come down and have enough commitment and passion to it to really be able to stick with it. Now, this is the process. This is not exactly how I teach it in class, but these are the kind of the steps that I suggest you go through. I've obviously highlighted one of the lines here. You've come up with an idea. You've identified a problem, and you've either found or you've created the solution to that problem. While we're in a crisis situation, you're going to need to react quickly, because there, like I said, as opposed to in times when things are really good, when people are in crisis mode, more people are coming up with more ideas. There's more people active in trying to find out things they can do to make things better, ultimately for their business or for their community or however. And so you need to react quickly. It doesn't mean knee jerk and not do the process the right way, but if you've got an idea and you don't find anybody else out in the marketplace doing it right now, you need to get on it quick. And then you need to create a piece, test it, review, revise. And you do that over and over and over. And you bring your customers into that, your potential customers into it. It's the kind of the idea of the beta testing. But if you will do that early on with your customers, you're going to get so much more information and engagement out of them that you're going to be able to perfect your product or get it to a better stage quicker and faster and ultimately out to market than you could have if you just tried to do this on your own. Identify the business, the benefits and differentiation. That's really so you can sell it. That's so you can get people to get behind it and understand why it matters, understand how it solves the solution, and really to be able to be excited about it and understand how it affects their lives. You need to identify your resources. That could be, materials, that could be money, that could be time, that could be employees, whatever the case. Identify those resources. Figure out how you're going to generate revenue, making sure your revenue is greater than your resources. Find needed money if you need to. There's a lot of angel investor groups and that sort of thing out there that you can find money through. Nonprofits, you can find grants and partnerships and whatnot, and then launch. Get out there and launch that thing. Go through these steps, but not, as I've mentioned on my website, most ideas stop at somebody's mind and they become unrealized dreams. And even if they've done a few of these things and a few of these steps, they get distracted or something else comes along or whatever the case. But if you're passionate about it, you got to go through it and you've got to launch. There's a great book called from John Acuff called Finish. And that's kind of the launch of the entrepreneurial process. And his book is really about finish what you started. So many people get, short-sighted and won't go through it. They get distracted and they can't move on from there. Kind of in closing here, some of this sounds obvious, but I can tell you people don't do it. A lot of entrepreneurs do things by the hip, and that's okay sometimes, but you've really got to come back ultimately and bring in those plans, your business plans, your marketing plans, and so on and so forth. You're testing and improving your product. But the 4 key elements that I suggest and that I believe, and I've heard other people talk about it, is 1, you've got to have a great idea. Not just a good idea, you need a great idea. There are lots of good ideas out there, but you want to be excited and feel good about your idea. And then ultimately the same way about your product. You need a great product. You don't want to have something out there that you've just done halfway just to it may start that way before your testing process because you don't exactly know how to transition it, but you've got to have a great idea. Then you've got to have a great product. Ultimately, you've got to develop a great team. You can't do all of this yourself. Whether you're finding other partners or you're just hiring staff, you need a great team. And a lot of people don't put enough emphasis on that aspect. And then ultimately, a great execution. That's part of the launch. These are all things that you need to do on a great level, not just halfway, not just as a side thing all the time. If you're really going after it, you need to put 150% into it. And if they're not all great, then you're going to have missed opportunities and you're going to have things that it just won't work out to the best potential. And so those are the kind of things that I say that, through all this process, the ideation, coming up with ideas, being creative about it, and then putting your plans together. If you don't do all these at great levels, then you're going to limit your success.
That's good. This is good. David, do you mind if we take some questions right now?
No, that's fine.
So you've got a few that have come up. One question is about organization. How do I organize? You took us through the process of ideation a minute ago. How do we organize all of the information that comes with ideation and developing and putting a plan together to launch?
Well, ultimately, that's a business plan. And if you Google, startup business plans, you're going to be able to find a tremendous amount of resources out there. The SBDC, which is part of the SBA, is a great place to find a lot of this information. I have here a slide that I actually use I will use for class. I've used other business canvas models throughout my time in teaching, and I've taken all of those and really looked at them and evaluated things. I found things that I didn't like the order of importance or just the order of how you do things. And I've created this business model canvas where you start with the ideation, you start with the problem, you start with the solution, then you move to your customer. Without knowing what the problem solution is, you don't know who your target market and your customer are going to be. Then you look at the benefits of the product, the things that resonate with the customer, the things that it's going to save them time, it's going to make them look and feel better, or whatever the case. Maybe it's going to make them some money. Then you're looking at your competition, whether that competition are companies or alternatives. There's always an alternative out there to your business, and that may be just do nothing. Somebody, they can just not buy it. They can just not do it. That's always an alternative, but there's other alternatives besides competition within other companies. There may just be alternatives that they're doing it DIY or whatever the case to make it happen. Then you're looking at your advantages. Your advantages is the next step. And that's really the things like my washer and dryer, washes quicker or better. And, it has these different technologies, or, my car has, certain types of wheels or turn radius or 0 to 60 and so many seconds. Those are advantages. Those are things people want to know, and that's part of your sales package, but they're different from benefits. They're not necessarily things that it's just like the list of things you'll see on a product of why this product is great.
Gotcha.
You've got to move into your messaging, what you're going to say to your customers. What do your customers want to hear? That's one thing I learned a long time ago in marketing. It's not about what you want to tell them. It's about what they want to hear. And so you really have to voice your message in a way it's something that they want to hear.
Kind of anticipating their questions, if you would.
Most definitely. Most definitely. You've got to be consistent with your branding. And a big part of it is this is a part where you're really telling your story. Maybe you have a story about your problem and solution. Or maybe you were inspired because your grandfather was involved in something of the case and that inspired you. Something inspired you, and that's an important part of your message, particularly if you're presenting to raise money and that sort of thing, a pitch competition or something. 8 is channels, materials channels, production channels, marketing, distribution, all these kind of things. They're distribution aspects. They're called channels. And I've just kind of cleaned some of this up to, I don't know, maybe for me, it was being able to understand it on that 6th grade level. They talk about telling you to do that. Some of the things I read just weren't clear and concise to me. And so I kind of dumbed it down to what I felt comfortable being able to read and teach. Then you've got your startup needs, and then you've got your expenses, and then your revenue format. And so these are 11 steps that I suggest going through. And this is how I format my class through these 11 steps. And I'll actually have this up on my website, and it'll be part of this presentation, and people can look at it and see. And if they're doing something entrepreneurial, if they'll follow these steps, then they're going to have a greater level of success. And ultimately, some of that is to build a business plan as well. That's what we do. We develop a pitch competition or a pitch plan and then a business plan.
That's good. And you answered the next question. Is this going to be available on your website? So yes, folks, it will be available. This is something that you can use. Thank you for making that available as a resource for us, David. The next question is, what are some of the reasons people don't launch?
Fear.
Experience.
Fear, money, self-doubt, lack of focus. There's a lot of reasons. Sometimes it's just they get to the point where they get tired of it. They don't know what the next steps are. They hear entrepreneurship and innovation, but they're not following a model like this. And so they get to a particular place, they hit a brick wall, and they don't know where to turn to. So resources, not just resources financially, but resources of community groups, resources like the MIC here at the Innovation Center with Mercer. Newtown Macon has training, SBDC has training, SCORE, the volunteer group there, is a wonderful group to deal with. There's Macon Startup Week. There's a lot of different resources, and I've got those on my website listed, and the Innovation Center has some, and there's just a lot of different resources out there. And I feel like people are not, I think honestly, in a lot of cases, you don't like to feel dumb and not have the answers. And so I think a lot of entrepreneurs get to this point where they don't know the answers and they don't want to reach out for help. And I think
they don't launch because of that kind of paralysis there.
Yeah, exactly. And, I tell everybody it's that whole KISS example, keep it simple, stupid. This is not something that you have to make it where you're like a brain surgeon. Keep to the core basics and, really focus on that, and then not let fear and doubt and lack of resources get in your way.
That makes sense. This next question is interesting, and I wish I know who asked this so that we could get more clarity, but I've got a great idea and I've got a great product. How do I convince people that my idea is not crazy?
That is a good idea. The really, it goes back to this model canvas that I would suggest that person to go through. One is, okay, you've got a great idea. Well, how did that great idea come about? Did you identify a problem that it's associated with, and this is a solution, or did you just come up with this great idea? Was it just popped in your head kind of thing? If it just popped in your head kind of thing, then you need to start looking at the marketplace and really seeing, is it something that the marketplace could get excited about, that people could love, even if it's a small core group to begin with. And then you want to start talking to them. You want to figure out this aspect of the target audience, who's going to be the best person to buy that product or that service, or that you're going to be serving as a part of this. And you want to identify them. And I've listed several examples of things you need to know: their age, their income, where they live, all that kind of stuff. And if you'll follow these steps, particularly this aspect of dealing with your target audience early on, that's where you're going to get your answers. Gotcha. And yes, people are going to, wonder about some of this stuff, and they might say this is kind of crazy, but from the conversations you have, then you can develop your benefits, how it benefits your target audience. And then you can explain those to them. And then you can have, what your advantages are of it. And you can explain those and share those and fine tune all of that. And just through the stages 1, 2, 3, 4, you could even skip 5 and 6. Those are really where you're going to be able to do the research and do the work up front to make sure your potential customers could be excited about some of this. And ultimately, once they understand it better, then, they're going to be able to be more excited about it. The other thing is, here again, don't make it too difficult. If it's something I've heard, if you can't explain it in one sentence, it's too difficult. I have a little different philosophy. I follow the idea of the elevator pitch, where you've got about a minute, 45 seconds to 60 seconds in an elevator with somebody, and you've got to explain your idea in that period of time. If you cannot explain and get your idea across in that period of time, then you're probably going to have a hard time with it.
That makes sense. Do the research to prove that you are not crazy. You got to prove that your idea has some bona fides to it, right?
Most definitely.
Makes sense. All right. This will be the last question. I know this is on a lot of people's mind. So this person says, I heard today that venture capitalists have stopped giving funds. Where do I get the money to get my idea off the ground?
Well, with venture capitalists, I haven't read that. I have seen some of that in conversation, but there's still going to be angel investor groups out there. There are people whose businesses are centered around finding entrepreneurs and investing in them. I would suggest starting local. Newtown Macon is a great place to go. Maybe you're not going to get $50,000 from them, but maybe you can get $500 or $1,000 from them. Main Street Macon has these types of things. SBDC might have aspects like this. Instead of looking for these huge venture capitalists right off to begin with, you may have to start small and understand that, this may have to be a garage business for a little while. And, you're not going to be able to just launch in the way that you would hope. In fact, I would suggest start small, keep it small. Don't bring on more employees and more expenses than you have to begin with. But look at your local community. There's going to be potential resources there. It may be that you need to talk to family members and get their buy-in to it. That's not something that we all want to do and have to ask for money, but if you believe in this idea and you can get them to believe in it, then, they may be willing to do that. Grandpa or grandma or mom or dad or whatever the case, may be willing to jump in there and help. So the situation with the venture capitalists is only temporary, in my opinion. There are groups that want to do this, and it's really how they make money. So even if they're kind of slowing down, there's still going to be resources out there, particularly if you have a strong idea, a great idea and a great product.
That's good. All right. Well, I guess I said that was going to be the last question. Maybe one more. How do we get in touch with you, and how do we get a copy of this business model canvas?
Oops, there we go. My name here at Mercer, I'm an adjunct professor here at Mercer, so I have an office in the Innovation Center. I've got a Mercer email address that you can reach me at. I also have my own website that is really just a little bit about me and what I'm doing of working with entrepreneurs and innovators. So website is here, and also my Instagram page. And I'm going to take this, I'm going to have it loaded up on my website. Mercer's going to have this loaded up, I think, on YouTube. And so you can go back and look and listen through there. But here again, I will have these resources and the slides just themselves, and particularly the business model. Eventually, give me a couple of days, but I'll get it up on my website as well.
This was absolutely wonderful, David. Thank you for sharing this. This was a wealth of knowledge, and you see folks are in the chat saying great information. Thank you. So look for this presentation on business.mercer.edu. And there will be a link to the presentation if you want to watch this again, if you want to share it with friends. We encourage you to do that. Folks, we invite you to come back and join us once again next week for the Mercer Professional Development Series. Next week, we're going to talk about jobs and what does work look like in this new economy and this new normal. Dr. Miriam Kispe-Angoli is going to be with us to talk about that. So please join us next week. Thank you for being with us for Mercer University's Professional Development Series. Thank you, David Canady, for this, engaging and full of information presentation.
I appreciate the opportunity, and I encourage anybody that's got ideas. That's part of what the MIC does. It's not just students and faculty. It can be involved with the community as well. So